Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to discuss quants communicating and kind of the issues around it, and trying to understand this from a perspective if you're not a quant. So there's kind of two aspects to this, and I think we always focus on the first one. The first piece of this is that quants struggle to communicate sometimes. It's just, I think, hardwired in a lot of us in the fact that we do so well at the quantitative side. We spend so much of our time dedicated to learning all of that we just don't put a lot of time on the communication aspect and a lot of the soft skills involved. So I do push quants all the time. You need to improve communication. I heard recently one of the big banks was interviewing and they require you to do a written and reading portion of an interview. So you read a document, you do a write-up, and you explain more or less what this document is about. The document has nothing to do with finance. It's like general, like scientific-y articles you can just read. They're kind of general, but it helps to show if you can communicate or not. And this is huge in validation as we are writing reports constantly on models and model validation. And so on that first piece, I push quants. You need to go out there and you need to work on your communication skills, and you need to network, and you need to make sure you're effective. If you're not effective, it's kind of like this analogy I've heard, which it's not my analogy. I heard this from someone. I looked online, I couldn't even find it. But someone gave an analogy that quants are like Ferraris. They're very powerful, they have a lot of information, and they can do great things. But the communication piece of the Ferrari is more or less like the drivetrain and the axles. It's what makes the car basically roll forwards and backwards. It's that communication aspect. Whereas the kind of like the brains or the quant portion is essentially like the engine. And so if you don't have the communication skills, regardless of how good you are and how powerful your quantitative analytics is, you are going to be worthless. But this leads me into the second piece, which I think a lot of people don't understand, especially if you're coming from the business side, even communicating from quant to quant or from different technical aspects, we struggle to communicate. And I think the second piece is not that we're not good at communicating, it's that there's this frustration of, I don't know where you are intellectually on the same level of what I'm trying to explain to you. So for example, I absolutely love financial engineering. A lot of my emphasis goes on the time series and econometrics kind of front. I like to do modeling that's in the time series realm. That's my specialty and I love it. But when I go to meet with, whether it be other practitioners, students, I've met with academic professors, managers, colleagues, model developers, other business people, you get going into these topics and I know them really, really well. And so with quants, we typically have this very deep knowledge in a field of study. The issue is when I start going off and I'm just talking and I'm using more like industry profession tactics, like I'm talking about whether the series is I1 or I2 or I0, and if they measure the stationarity, and are you using the ADF test, right? And how many lags did you use in this test? A lot of people kind of know the terminology in general, but they don't really understand the technicality behind it. And so when you're a quant and you're doing something that's more complicated, just like when you have problems that are n-dimensional, so as the dimensionality increases in mathematics and problems and modeling, it's harder and harder to explain and to visualize different dimensions. So for example, you can think in 2D, you can think in 3D, but how do you think in like 100D? Like there's 100 dimensions into a problem, right? These are things we have to think about, you have to explain. And I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that I don't know where you are intellectually and I am intellectually on these topics. So it's not that one person's smart or dumb, it's just people have different specialties. So you have to start at different levels to figure out how to explain something to somebody. And the frustration I always have, and I've talked to a few of my colleagues and friends who are in similar situations, they feel the same way in the fact that you start out explaining something very technically, you have the jargon, you expect everybody's on the same page, which is usually a mistake. And then people start asking questions. So what you do is then you drop down and you start going through the basics, like, okay, we need to understand distributions, we need to understand why the mean and the variance and the standard deviations need to be constant, and how these are called moments. When you have the first moment and the second moment, they have to be constant over time, and how this can result in like correlations, right? I'm going through like, this is all the stuff you need to know before you can get even to the concept of stationarity in my example. And then people get mad at you like, I'm not stupid, don't tell me about, how a distribution works, and don't tell me what the mean is. I already know what the mean is. But they don't realize you have to have all that information, you have to line it up. I have to know that you're on track to start at the beginning. You have to know everything in the middle to get to where we're going. So now you're upset because you feel like I'm treating you like you're stupid. I'm upset because I started here and you had no clue what you were doing, so now I gotta go all the way back to the beginning. And now you're mad I'm starting at the beginning. So the question is where do you start the conversation and where do you catch up the information needed to have the conversation? And I recently had a great conversation with a student I met with, and he was telling me about this research he's doing. He's doing stochastic processes, which again is financial engineering related, and he's taking a class on stochastic processes and applying it to different financial sets of data. And so as he's applying this, he's telling me about it. I'm like, oh yeah, did you do this? Did you do that? What about this? How did you fix this? You know, how is this working out? This sounds like an amazing project, and I'm really excited about it. And then he tells me, he goes, Dimitri, it's great talking to you about this. Because the thing is I tell other people this and they have no clue what I'm talking about. And so everyone just kind of has like this blank stare and they're like, yeah, cool. Like you get this numbness because people either aren't excited about it, so they know it, but they just don't care. Or I think the vast majority is quants aren't understood. We're working in a very specific area. And I think this comes back to A, most quants have very deep specialties, and B, most of our work is so complicated and so technical that you have to have the same level of technicality and competency to get there. And this is very, very apparent to me, at least, when I've worked with different managers. I've had managers with MBAs and business backgrounds. I've had managers with PhDs in very quantitative fields, and typically those that I'm working with PhDs, even if they're not in a specialty that I'm in, I can communicate very well with them because they understand that, okay, what you're telling me is technical, you're going back, you're going to review the basics, I understand these pieces, okay, I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this, and then they'll ask a few questions in the middle, and then we're at least to the same page where we can finish making key decisions. Where a lot of times I have colleagues who don't have the technical background. So you're not a quant and you are upset because we're not communicating very well. But I think this is coming down to the fact that you just don't have the background to get to where we're going. And so when I start going backwards, sometimes I'm not even going back far enough. And so now we have this weird communication where I'm speaking a language of, say, like mathematics and statistical analysis, and you're in like a business analytics role, and you think you're quantitative, and you might be in your own setting, but the issue is how do you catch up to where I'm at? How do I cover enough information? It's just frustrating. And so I know a lot of people out there, if you're a quant, you're probably sitting there going, yeah, this makes complete sense, right? I've been in this situation and I've explained it to somebody and then someone gets mad and a manager blows up and then nothing happens and dumb decisions are made and you're just sitting there frustrated like nothing's working, I don't know what to do, I'm not communicating, and we just shut down a lot of times. So the solution for this is I'm going to try to encourage you as a quant, so if you're watching this and you're a quant, I would encourage you to, when people start explaining things to you and they dumb it down, realize they're probably trying to figure out where you're at. Don't rush them, don't get upset, just listen. Listen to all the steps in the processes. I know, I get upset sometimes and I'm frustrated because someone's explaining how OLS works and it's like, yeah, that's years and years behind me, I already know how to do that. But what I've been doing more of, and I have found helpful, is that they start explaining something and I know it, but just listen to them, wait for them to get through their entire spiel, because a lot of times they're going back further, which is okay, and they're making sure all the groundwork is laid, and there's typically a few pieces of information that you don't agree on or you're missing, and once you get those, then you can start to catch up and realize, okay, we're on the same page. So if you're a quant, don't get frustrated and start at the beginning, just listen and try to hear out what they're saying. Now, the second piece of advice is for everybody, whether you're a business person or a quant and somebody's explaining something technical to you, if you do not understand, just say, I don't understand, okay? I see this all the time, especially with students. For some reason, the older you get, you realize you just don't care anymore about being, I guess, looking dumb or being wrong. And so you ask those really good questions. But usually when you're younger and someone says, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z? I need this analysis done. I need these technicals finished. Then somebody goes, okay, yeah, not a problem. And then like they leave and you come back like 2 days later and you're like, hey, are those done yet? I need those. And then they're like, oh, well, did you want it done this way or did you want it done that way? And then you start figuring out they didn't know what they were doing. So if you don't know what you're being told, whether you're assigned a project or someone's trying to explain some concept to you, seriously, just stop and ask. Just ask, like, I don't understand this. Wait, so we're doing this, but I don't understand why are we doing this and how did we get to this conclusion? And then ask a lot of questions. I know you might feel stupid. I have done this. I have felt dumb and I've asked these questions, But I think that's one of the key features of being successful as a quant, is realizing you don't know everything. There's lots and lots of areas you just don't have a clue about. And so you need to really dive in, guys, and ask those questions. Make sure you're on the same page. Make sure you understand what's going on. If you don't, your life's gonna be miserable. You're not gonna add a lot of value to your team, and you're not gonna look like a standout player. So I hope this video is a little helpful for you guys. I hope if you're a quant, you can relate to this. I'd love to hear in the comments below what you guys think if you had similar situations. Besides, just trying to listen better and be a better listener when these problems are getting technical, and two, asking questions, what advice do you guys have to help other quants as well as business people, model users, and everyone else out there to communicate with you better? Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe below, hit the like button if you like this video, and as always, until next time. Thanks for watching my video. If you find it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe.